All right, old friends, new friends, everyone in between, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you for watching, for listening. We appreciate you very, very much. Big shout out to our sponsor, Sunny Reds, 1841 Aber Road, just on the way from Highmark Stadium. They got a new outdoor patio bar. I saw a video of it yesterday. It's almost done. I cannot wait. Eventually, it will be nice weather out for a sustained period of time here in Buffalo, and we'll get to enjoy some patio bar time. So make sure you stop up at Sunny Reds. All right, midweek episode. As usual, I'm joined by my good buddy, Matt Warren from SB Nation. Messing around, for people who've been watching this all week, messing around with a new platform. So hopefully everything goes all right, man. What's going on, Matt? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm with you on the weather thing. It would be nice if it wasn't like we're back in March, like free agency's about to start. I think.
I I literally turned my heat on. Well, we're
Yeah.
recording this Tuesday, so I always need to put this disclaimer out when Matt's on. Late morning in the lunch hour Tuesday, just in case something crazy goes down and we're not talking about it on the show today. But yeah, man, Monday the heat actually popped back on in my house. The central air was on as recently as last Thursday or Friday, and now it's the heat. It's all about checks and balances, I guess, when it comes to Buffalo and the weather and air conditioning and the heat. It is what it is. But anyway, sooner or later it'll get nice out. So we're gonna spend a good chunk of today kind of reviewing, going over a feature that Joe Marino, everybody, if you're a Bills fan and you're in this content space, I'm sure about Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. Every year he does this absolutely fantastic 2-day feature counting down the top 10 players critical to the future of the Buffalo Bills. And he enlists a panel of other media people and content creators. I was on the panel. I've been on the panel. A lot of really great people too, like guys like Jeremy White's on there, Nate Gary, Anthony Marino from Buffalo Rumblings, Bruce Nolan, the overreaction guys, Miller, Fina, Ostrowski. Really, really solid panel. And we vote and we power rank guys 1 through 10. And then he accumulates, he adds it all up and he
Mhm.
comes up with a list. And then he asks us to make these video clips describing, the players. And then in a follow up episode, he would ask us follow up questions. If I can't emphasize this enough because people are like, what are you stealing from Joe Marino's? Like, no, we're talking about what he did on his show. I cannot recommend it enough. Go and listen. Locked On Bills. It's a two-parter. Really, really great stuff. Today, Matt and I are going to kind of go over that list. I'm going to share what my personal top 10 was on that list. And Matt's also going to give us a countdown. I wanted to get what his top 10 would be. So we're going to talk today about players that are just critical to the future of the Buffalo Bills. Real quick, though, I got to throw this up here, put it up on the screen. It's got nothing to do with the Bills, but I had to throw this up. Every now and then, you see an ad that just is really a kick-ass, cool thing to see. And we all know if you follow golf, or even if you don't, Scotty Scheffler got arrested last year at the PGA Championship. Fast forward a year later, he wins the major, and Nike put out an awesome ad. I want to put it up there on the screen. And it's pretty simple. It's Scotty Scheffler hitting a perfect tee shot on a beautiful picture perfect day out there. And the Nike ad says best player in the world. And then the next line says guilty. Um, how awesome is that ad, dude? Don't you think that's pretty solid, ain't it?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about like marketing campaigns, Nike's pretty good at them, and so
Mm,
they always are prepared for when one of their athletes wins. And in this case, I mean, I'm sure they had this meeting a long time ago, and just somebody said it, and it was just like the
yeah.
light went on for everybody. Not only is it a beautiful picture, we'll just say that, but the tagline is just wonderful.
Yeah, guilty. I love that a lot, man. Another thing, Buffalo sport thing too, because I know you're
Mhm.
a fan of the Bandits. The Bandits lost a close game 2 on the road Sunday at Saskatchewan, which means game 3, Buffalo this Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Kind of a weird start time, but I get it. Memorial Day weekend, 4:30 p.m. Saturday, game 3, winner take all, man, for all the marbles. As somebody who, is I would almost consider it blessed to be able to be a Bandits fan right now. If you actually
Mhm.
care about the team and you have any sort of emotional investment in the team, it kind of makes me jealous to not get an opportunity to play the Bills or especially the Sabres. When you're in a championship game, it's all in that mentality, the emotions of it. If you're not really a fan, you really don't care. You're like, well, it'd be cool if the Bandits win, but you really don't care. But for people who actually have a stake in it, an emotional stake in the team and how they do, how you feeling right now? I mean, it was still a handful of days away, but like, again, game 3, it doesn't get any bigger than that. Winner take all in Buffalo, trying to win a third consecutive championship this Saturday.
I mean, yeah, like you said, it was a really close loss. It was a close win in game one too. So I mean, that's one of the things about NLL games is a lot of them could be really close like that. And so yeah, they have a great chance to pull it out. Obviously, in game 3, I was just looking up ticket prices. Like, you can still get in for less than $100 if you buy your ticket now. I don't know what it's going to be on
Wow.
Wednesday when the podcast releases, but there are $100 tickets for this championship game. I do anticipate them selling it out one way or the other, whether it's by offering discounted tickets at the very end if there's still a handful left. So it's going to be rocking in that building. And if they get up early, it could start to snowball real quick and turn into a nice little celebration. So it's cool to have a championship game in Buffalo. Um, you know,
That
anytime really. Like,
that's what I'm talking about. Exactly. Just I mean, it's not like the Bills played for 4 straight Super Bowls, and I am old enough to have been alive for them. The Sabres have played for a Stanley Cup before, so
yep.
it's not like it's unheard of in Buffalo, like they never played for championships, but neither of those teams have won one. And it's been a long, long time since either have played for a championship, especially the Bills, actually. And just to be able to again experience that emotion of a winner take all championship situation, I'm kind of envious of the diehard Bandits fans. Obviously, hopefully, it'll go well. Game 1 was a really cool scene. Like, the party in the plaza was awesome to
Mhm.
see. So hopefully everything will go well for the Bandits on Saturday, and they can win for a third consecutive year. All right,
And it's in
let's.
Buffalo. Like, I mean,
eh,
having a home game's cool. Like, the Bills winning the Super Bowl is going to be electric when it happens this year, but it won't be in Buffalo when they actually do it. So,
Sure, sure. And look, I've heard some Bandits fans talking about how there was a piece of them that were kind of glad that they didn't win in Saskatchewan on Sunday so that they could celebrate in Buffalo. I'm like, I don't know
cool.
about that, man. I don't know if you want to get into anything can happen in a one game scenario here. But to your point, people I've talked to, they say, if the Bandits could get off to a good start and get some momentum going at home, having done it the last 2 years, it hopefully could snowball from that.
Mhm.
Anyway, let's get into Joe Marino's Locked On Bills feature. Like I said, that he did, and make sure you go check it out. I can't emphasize that enough. The top 10. All right. So, again, to kind of reiterate a little bit, he had 15 people, 15 content creators. Joe did not take part in this. He had 15 content creators do our own rankings, 1 through 10. And the definition, because it could be a little, murky, a little muddy here, it's players critical to the future of the Buffalo Bills. I'll give you an example of somebody who I don't think is critical to the future of the Buffalo Bills and why he wouldn't be ranked in this. Just for some clarification, take a guy like Joe Bosa, all right? There's a very good chance that Joe Bosa's here for 1 year. He's
Mhm.
critical to the 2025 Buffalo Bills. Is he really critical to the 2026, 2027 Buffalo Bills? Probably not. I mean, you never say never. He's not like he's an old dude. He's not 36 years old. He's not Calais Campbell. So, I mean, it's potentially he could be there, but you get what I'm saying. It's more about both the present and also the future. And again, he tasked us with counting down from 1 to 10 these players. And each content creator, including myself, we had 2 segments. The first one was presenting a player that made the top 10. Mine was Christian Benford, by the way, who was, I'll talk about him in a second. But anyway, my assignment was Christian Benford. And then the second episode, the follow up, he would ask a question about each, like something that came up from the panel. Like, for an example, mine was Keon Coleman was ranked number 4 in 2023 or 2024. I'm sorry. Last year, he was number 4 on our list. This year, he didn't make the top 10. In fact, he was number 15 on the list. And I was tasked with talking about why I had Keon Coleman on my list. Greg Thompson from Cover One and myself had him at number 8 each, which was the highest that anybody had. Now I'll pull it up on the screen and I'll read it for the audio side here. This was the consensus top 10. Number 1 was obvious. That's Josh Allen. Okay. After that, let me pull down, get rid of this panel here. Josh Allen was number 1. Number 2, Greg Rizzo. Number 3, Deion Dawkins. I feel like you might disagree with some of these. I certainly did, and I'll talk about mine too. But anyway, number 1, Josh. Number 2, Groot. Number 3 was Deion Dawkins. Number 4 was Christian Benford. Number 5 was Spencer Brown. Number 6 was Terrell Bernard. Number 7 was Khalil Shakir. Number 8 was Dalton Kincaid. Number 9 was Max Hairston. And number 10 was Ed Oliver. So that was your top 10, folks. And I'll run down 11 through 15. These are guys who didn't make it, but they came close. Number 11 was Josh Palmer. Number 12 was Tyron Johnson. Number 13 was Cole Bishop. Number 14 was Connor McGovern. And like I talked about, number 15 was Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman. First of all, what do you think of, before again, I'm going to get into you. I want you to give me your own personal top 10. But before we get into that stuff, what do you think of this exercise? Does it kind of make sense to you when you talk about the, players critical to the future of the Buffalo Bills, kind of looking at a big picture as opposed to only this year?
Yeah, obviously we spent a lot of time talking about the current year, the current window, whatever you want to say. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like what you're talking about, 2 to 3 years is still like the window. Like as long as Josh Allen's Josh Allen, that's the window for the next 5, 6 years. But for a lot of the players that we're going to talk about today, their window is closer to like 2 or 3 years. And so
Mm-hmm.
not focusing entirely on 2025, I do think it helps us not be like knee jerk reactions to everything, which a lot of hot take artists do. Obviously, like the names that you listed, as far as like the content creators that put their time into this, are not mostly knee jerk folks. They're not usually hot take people. Outside of like a random Wednesday in July, and we need to fill some airtime. But like as far as they're thoughtful about it is my point. And so yes, it makes sense that like you would do an exercise like this for a long-term thing, as opposed to say like I wouldn't necessarily go through this process just for the 2025 season, because I think there's a lot of give and take with that. There's a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
things that can happen, whether it's an injury or a scheme change or something like that that could really impact someone in a single year. But looking at like a body of work, going forward, I think is a really helpful exercise for folks that aren't necessarily like Super Bowl or bust, man.
I like how you say hot take artist. There's not a lot of, but am I a hot take artist?
No,
I don't know that I
no, I
am.
don't think so. But like you know, this isn't a criticism of WGR for sure, but like they've got hours and hours and hours of stuff to fill. 200 something days a year. It's just like you can't do that.
Sure.
You can't have every minute of every day on WGR be thoughtful. It's just not possible. And like again, not a dig on them. Like so, it's just like I'm not saying that they're hot take artists all the time. I think they're all very thoughtful folks, especially the guys that you mentioned. But it just can't be like every single second of their entire year be that way.
Sure. Well, Nate Gary's a hot take artist. We'll throw that out there. I'm gonna call that out. I am too, I guess, to some extent. Anyway, I was also a little bit wrong, and I want to make sure I correct myself, and I also want to make sure I give credit to the right people. I said a panel of 15 content creators. That's not completely accurate. It was a panel of 14 content creators, and the fans also had a vote
Oh,
in
okay.
this exercise. Again, that Joe, and by the way, as a content creator, somebody who does a show 5 days a week that I do, Joe does 5 just for Locked On Bills. He does 2 now with Jeremy and Joe on Monday and Thursday. They have their own show. He does scouting stuff. dude works really, really hard.
Mhm.
And I could tell you from experience, juggling 14 people and having 14 people have to make clips and then intro them and outro them and insert them into a podcast, hell of a lot of work, man. So it's major props to Joe. This is not an
The
easy exercise to do if you're working with an ensemble cast like he did.
the voting alone takes a long time. And so when you
Yeah.
told me that you guys made clips and sent them in too, I'm like, geez, that's something that I would want to have to handle.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. It's fun and it's a good exercise. And it's always
Mhm.
fun to compare what your list is compared to what the consensus is. And I'm going to compare mine. And then I also want to get yours and we could
Mhm.
compare yours as well. But to just to make sure that I mention all the right people. So like I said, the panel of this voting consisted of myself, Bruce Nolan, Greg Thompson from Cover One, Anthony Marino from Buffalo Rumblings, Joe Miller from Overreaction, Sterling, Z-Bot, I believe from Buffalo Fanatics, Ryan Talbot, of course, Nate Gary, Anthony Prohaska from Cover One, John Fina, Joe Ostrowski, Jeremy White, and then the fan as well. So, like I said, there was a lot of people participated in this. And I kind of like when we have a spreadsheet, I'm not gonna share it publicly because maybe somebody doesn't want to get called out. Although I am going to call out a couple of people. Like John Fina had some really weird, some really weird ones, man. I got to tell you that, man. I think he was the only one who actually had Joe Bosa. He had him fifth on his list. That's interesting. I'd love to talk to him and figure out why. Actually, he wasn't the only one. Greg Thompson also had Joe Bosa in his top 10. So it wasn't completely unheard of. But anyway, props to them. Really good panel. And like I said, I read off the top 10. Let me get into my top 10 and I'll explain them why. And then we'll take a break. We'll come back on the other side. I want to get what your top 10 is. And also, we got a couple other Bills and NFL stuff that I want to hit on before we get out of here for our today's show. So, this was my personal top 10. All right. Number one, we're going to skip number one for both of us because if it's not Josh Allen, like what you shouldn't be allowed to be on a panel if Josh Allen isn't number one on your critical players. Number two, I had Christian Bedford. I had him all the way up at number two. He was the consensus number four. To me, he's an elite young corner, one of the better young corners in the NFL. You just literally gave him a chunky extension. He is the guy who is going to be, I don't want to say exclusively covering the other team's best receiver because the Bills don't necessarily match up that way, but he's got a side of the field that he covers really well. He plays the run really well. He just does so many things really, really good. And I also consider him critical because we've seen the last couple of years what's happened when he got hurt. He got hurt in the first quarter of the Chiefs game in the AFC Championship this year. He got hurt in the wild card round the year before that and didn't play against the Chiefs in Orchard Park. In 2022, wasn't really a full-time starter yet anyway, but he was on IR. Christian Benford hasn't played in a Bills elimination championship loss as a starting corner yet. You know what I mean? So I consider him critical. So I have him at number two. Number three, I had Groot, which the panel had at number two. Highest paid player, defensive player on the team. The most accomplished, consistent, all around defensive end on the team. And again, if you sign an extension, you're a part of this future to me. So I have him at number three. Number four, Khalil Shakir. Not, the everybody eights thing was hard to really get a wide receiver up high, but I just think Khalil Shakir is really important because I just think this wide receiving room is just a lot better when he's there and a lot worse off when he's not. So I have him at number four. Plus, he got the extension. Number five, I had Tyron Johnson, which some people can argue, he's getting up there in age. Maybe he won't be around for another more than 2 years or something like that. But right now, and for at least the near future during this Super Bowl window, I still think he's a hugely critical piece. I think he's one of the better slot corners in the league. I thought he did not play well against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and I thought that was a major reason, along with Kyrie Elam. We talk about Kyrie Elam, and we talk about Damar Hamlin and the struggles that those guys, how lousy they looked in the secondary against the Chiefs. Teron Johnson was not much better in that specific game. So they need him to be better in those big moments, and I just think he's a critical player. So I have him at number five. Number six, Terrell Bernard, your captain, your middle linebacker. He's young. He just signed an extension. As I'm saying that, I probably could have made a case for myself to have him higher than I did. But so I got Terrell at 6. Number 7, I got a rookie, Max Hairston. You took a guy with speed, a guy with a different skill set than maybe what a lot of us expected. And a lot of people thought that Trey Amos was the more safer, prototypical type. The Bills kind of went against that grain. The guy who can run across the field with Xavier Worthy, who can run across the field with Tyreek Hill on those crossing routes. If he's successful, him and Christian Benford, I think Christian Benford's a lock. If he stays healthy, Christian Benford, you know what he is. Max Hairston, if he could reach what his potential is that the Bills see in him to make him a first round pick, man, you got one of the better corner shutdown duels in the entire NFL, not just for now, but for the next 4 years or so and one of them on a rookie contract. So again, maybe I could have had him higher. Number 8, I did have Keon Coleman. Like I said, one of only a few people in the panel who had Keon in the top 10. I had him at number 8. Greg Thompson was the only other one who had him that high as well. Um, I still have a lot of faith in him. I have a decent amount of faith in him. I don't say a lot, but I have a decent amount of faith in him. But what the Bills didn't do this offseason factored into my decision. Like if the Bills lost faith in him, maybe they go and they sign a bigger ticket free agent, or maybe they go and work out a bigger trade, or they certainly take a wide receiver early in the draft, and they didn't. So I consider him critical, certainly to the present and at least a little bit to the future of the Buffalo Bills because they put big ticket or big draft investment receiver on hold this year for Keon Coleman, who, in fairness to him, was hurt and was not the same player after he was hurt, and showed plenty of promise beforehand. And he was number 4 last year on our list, and then he falls all the way down to 15 this year. I had him higher. Number 9, Cole Bishop, a young safety who I'm not going to put a lot of stock into what he did last year because I almost feel like he was not set up for success last year with the Bills between being in an open competition at camp only to get hurt right away, get put behind the 8 ball. He completely got thrown into the lineup in that Houston game on the road, and that was kind of a disaster. Had started later in the year with Rapp and Hamlin having injuries. He got some experience. I thought he was okay during his time as a starter. But I think he's a big part of this future. Again, he's young. Taylor Rapp, they can move on from Taylor Rapp as early as next season. Damar Hamlin is not a long-term answer. I don't think Derek Forrest is a long-term answer. So Cole Bishop, they need him to be good because if he's not, you're going to have a big safety problem. But if he's pretty good and he is what you want him to be as a second-round pick, then I feel like at least one of your 2 safety positions will be solid for years to come. And then the last one that I had on my list is Spencer Brown. I had him at 10. He's your right tackle. I think he's one of the best right tackles in the NFL right now. He's still relatively young. He's locked in the middle of a long-term contract. And so that's why I had him here in my top 10. Let me think about this, Matt. Because I don't want to get, I want to get your reaction, but I want your own countdown. And you kind of picking apart mine kind of sets up for what yours is going to be. You know what I mean? So
I do.
I'm trying to figure this out. Well, here's what we're going to do. Let's take a quick break, come back on the other side, and then I want you to start getting into your top 10. And then as you go along, I'll start to compare them to where yours was to mine and where yours was to the rest of the consensus as well. So we'll be literally right back. All right, I'm back here with Matt Warren from SB Nation. I just talked everybody's ears off for like the last 10 minutes while Matt was patiently sitting there. But we're kind of going with turns, and now we're going to flip it a little bit. Matt's going to be giving us a lot of insight here going forward. So let's get into your top 10, and let's start with number 2 because it ain't going to be, or do you want to count down from,
Well,
what would you prefer? Which way to do it?
let me talk about the folks that didn't make my top 10 and
Good.
just like briefly explain some of that. First of all, James Cook, I don't anticipate him being on the team past 2025.
Sure.
So just like the panel and you didn't have him in the top 10, I had him way down at like 14, 15,
Gotcha.
somewhere in there. I didn't have Keon Coleman on my list, so let's talk about Keon Coleman a little bit. The Bills showed that they were able to manufacture offense around Keon Coleman,
Mhm.
and use him for sure, but also not use him, whether he was hurt, whether he was out of the lineup. They were able to still have a successful offense without him. I've never expected him to be like a wide receiver one anyway. I've always just thought he was going to be, that wide receiver two, develop into like, your Robert Woods role where he's like a super consistent player in that wide receiver two role. And so, like, yeah, I didn't have him in my top 10 either. Connor McGovern, if I knew he was going to be here long term, I would have had him on my list because I think he's really good at what he does.
Right.
But he's only got 1 year left on his deal, and they didn't extend him this offseason, or he didn't sign his extension this offseason, however you want to phrase it, as to whose fault it is. I didn't have Dalton Kincaid on my list. I do think he's a very important part of this team going forward.
Mhm.
But again, like they've shown that even when he's not in the lineup, they can still manufacture some pretty good offense. The last person I had outside of my top 10 that I wanted to talk about was Maxwell Harrison. And it was interesting when you talked about Keon Coleman was like fourth last year, and then he went to completely off the list this year.
Yeah.
It's almost like they overvalued a first round pick last year, um, and then obviously he got hurt and like had all these other things. I can't say a player that has never taken a snap before is like super critical to their success going forward. Um, so
That's
like
fair.
Kyer Elam was a first round pick and not critical to their success going forward because they had somebody that was able to step in and negate
Good
that
point.
problem. So it's not it's just like a thing I have as far as like dude hasn't even taken a training camp snap before, and we're like relying on him as like one of the 10 most important Bills for the future, and I
That's
don't
a
even know if he's
that's a
going to
good point.
start in week 1, so it's like all right, whatever.
I
But
wanna go through the list. I wanna see who not many people agree with you. I wanna see who did agree with you, who didn't have him on the list. Greg Thompson did not. Anthony Marino did not. Joe Miller did not. Sterling did not. Wow, actually, a lot of people did. Nate Gary did not. And Anthony from Cover One did not. And Jeremy White did not. Wow. And Joe Marino for his own list, he didn't have him either. Wow. All right, so a lot of people actually they're with you on that. That's a take that a lot of people believe. And I do want to add one last thing about Keon Coleman before we get into your top 10
sure.
that I will say. It's when I say critical to the future, it's that I also kind of look at it this way. If Keon Coleman hits, and I agree with you, by the way, when I say hit, I ain't talking T. Higgins. He ain't T. Higgins. He ain't going to
Mhm.
be T. Higgins. So let's just be really clear. But with the way this offense structured and operates, let's say he's a 45 to 50 catch, 850-yard, 7 touchdown guy. To me, that's a hit. If he hits going forward, that's an investment, whether it's a big financial one, whether it's a first round draft pick for the foreseeable future that maybe you don't have to use at that
Mhm.
position. Like if Keon Coleman sucks this year, okay, and if we like what he was last year and it turns out he's a fraud and that's what he is, and I'm not saying he's going to be, but if he is, you're going in the next offseason, you're probably going to be looking at a first round pick or a big ticket free agent, which the Bills won't be in great cap shape next year to be able to do that. So that's just one of the reasons why with Keon, when I kind of push back on that a little bit, not against necessarily against you, but against the majority, because the majority of the
Mhm.
panel also didn't have them in there anyway. But all right, some good points. All right, let's get into your top 10 now.
Sure, and I'll Josh Allen was number one. He's
Mhm.
Josh Allen. Number two, I did have Greg Rousseau, and I did this without looking at the other lists. Just for the record,
Sure.
I did go through and just try to do my own. Greg Rousseau, both for his youth and for his expectations. Um, I think he's shown so many flashes that I really want to see, kind of that next step from him. But he could be incredibly critical in all of their defense going forward against Lamar Jackson, against Patrick Mahomes, against Joe Burrow, against the players that they're going to have to beat to get to the Super Bowl and ultimately win the Super Bowl. So I have Greg Rousseau number two. And then he was what, third on yours? And
He
then,
was
yeah, number two overall
Greg Roselle
consensus.
was third on mine. He was the consensus number two. And I'm looking at like the lowest, like Joe Miller and Nate Gary had him at 7. Jerry Ostrowski actually didn't have him on his top 10. That's really interesting. But anyway, maybe I should be calling these people out. Maybe that's not my business to say. But anyway, he was pretty much for the most part 2 to 3, like where you have them
Right.
too as well. All right,
Um,
so let's go ahead.
Deion Dawkins, I still think has three really good seasons left in him. So I did place him third on my list. But he was the first one I looked at, like that age number. I was like, maybe he's
Yeah,
starting to not be. So, but like I said, I think he's got 2 to 3 really good seasons left in him at this point, and so like hasn't been dinged up, like hasn't really like had any of those problems. We haven't seen a fall off from him yet, and so I did put him down this high, number three, on a list.
I I didn't have him on my list. He was not on my list. I feel like the majority of people obviously agree with you. My thought process was I think he's really close to being done, but maybe he's not. Again, he's still playing at a great level. He should have been an all pro this past year. So maybe that's a little bit silly on me to not. I am literally no, I'm not. There's one other person. I'm gonna stop saying other people's names. I'll just tell you. One other person out of their entire panel did not have him in the top 10 besides myself. I'll tell you off here.
Yeah, he just he just turned 31, so he's going to be in his 30 age 31, age
Yeah,
32,
you're right.
age 33 season. So like I can definitely understand like if you only think that he's going to be critical for the next year and a half to 2 years, that you wouldn't have him very high on this list.
Agreed.
I just like I think we're going to get that third year out of him. I can't remember when his contract's up, but it's got to be close to that. Yeah. So I mean, I think he's going to be around for a little while.
Okay. What do you got next?
Christian Benford was fourth on my list. Just signed that contract extension. Obviously, going to be here for the long term.
Mhm.
Super important to what they want to do on defense. Despite the fact that they always say that they build from the inside out, they've given a lot of contracts to safeties and cornerbacks, um, things like that. So I just think that Christian Benford is going to be very critical for, especially for the development of a Maxwell Hairston on the other side. That you have, a strong presence on the other side.
Yep, and the panel was completely in line with you. They also had him consensus at number 4. Like I said, I had him all the way at number 2, which I believe was the highest. Oh, no, Nate Gary also had him at 2. But in line pretty much with what everybody was saying. So yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to argue that one.
The first time I deviate from the consensus panel is here. I actually had Ed Oliver fifth as opposed to
Mhm.
10th, which was the consensus big board. He a big pick, big money. He's got lots of help now. Again, like I think we saw him play pretty well in that playoff game. Like he just if it's not going to happen now, like it's not going to happen. And I do expect him to be around for several more years. They say they want to create pressure in the interior. He's the guy that can do that and help out Russo, help out those young guys, like, create pressure as well. So I just think Ed Oliver is incredibly important to what this team wants to do.
He made number 10 on the consensus. He was not on mine. Again, look, there's probably 15 guys, man. I'm sure you would agree with this. Like, I mean, you talked about guys who didn't make this list. We each have at least 15 guys who could very easily be in the top 10. For me, the first 3 to 5 maybe are really rock solid. And then after that is really it fluctuates a lot. But when it comes to Ed, I'm looking to see who had him the highest. Anthony Prohaska from Cover One had him really high as well. Zbot from Fanatics had him pretty high as well. But yeah, pretty much fell in well either out or like 7 to 10 range. And he ended up slotting in at number 10. I think maybe some people, maybe myself included, a little scared off meaning with TJ Sanders that maybe TJ Sanders could be a gateway to Ed Oliver not having much of a future with the Buffalo Bills. But I'll tell you what, he was one of the few defensive players who actually showed up against the Chiefs, which has been kind of a welcome sight to compare to what he's done in the playoffs recently. So this past year, he was great. He's still young. He's under contract, and he could be here for quite a while. So completely sensible one. All right, so you're halfway through. You had Josh, Groot. Who did you have? No, Deion Dawkins at number
Ian
3,
Dawkins.
Benford, and Ed Oliver. So you're up to 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I mean, just looking at Ed Oliver's contract, they can get out of it after this year.
Mhm.
If they really want to. But like, I mean, it's not like he's super expensive going forward. It's just more of the cap management going forward.
Sure.
It's $15 million in 2026, which I think is perfectly reasonable for a guy that actually does stuff on the inside. We'll see if like he can keep doing that. All right, so it's number 6 for me with Spencer Brown. What the Bills were able to do last year, keeping Josh Allen clean,
Yeah.
to his credit, Josh Allen's credit for sure, but also because of those two bookend tackles, I think is really important to what the Bills want to do. Brandon Beane has talked about it repeatedly. Brown signed for multiple years. Like you said earlier, one of the best right tackles in the league. If they can less than 1 sack per game for Josh Allen during the regular season is nuts. And so if they can keep that up, I mean, not just critical in big moments, but also like to keep him fresh throughout the season.
14 sacks for Josh Allen in 17 games. Well, 16 games in one stop
Well,
against
yeah, sure.
against the Patriots, but less than a sack a game. To your point, um, the panel largely agrees with where you have him. The panel actually has him at 5. Your colleague at Rumblings, Anthony Marino, had him at 3, which was high.
Ooh,
Z-Bot also had him at 3, and Nate Gary also had him at 3. So there's a lot of people who had him really high. Here's where I had him at number 10, and maybe I should have had him higher. Here's was my thought process, and now as I think about it in real time, I think it was a little bit on the silly side. But what made me kind of like with the Bills receivers, like if Keon Coleman goes down, the offense didn't suffer. I look back last year,
yeah.
Spencer Brown did not play against the Kansas City Chiefs in Orchard Park, and that offense was perfectly fine with Ryan Vandermark at right tackle for that game. But again, that's really short sighted. That's a tiny little sample size. I ain't trying to say Ryan Vandermark could be just as good a right tackle as Spencer Brown. So maybe I was a little short sighted in my analysis. I did have him in my top 10, but I only had him at number 10. But I do remember digging him a little bit just because the Bills was fine, the offense, when he didn't play. A little bit
And
silly.
it and it's interesting. Like I would imagine that those people that had Spencer Brown up at 3 had Deion Dawkins down at like 8 or 9. But if you had Deion Dawkins higher, like obviously Spencer Brown is going to be lower. You can't have both of them in like your top 3 or your top 4. I don't
Yeah,
think.
maybe I take the offensive line for granted because I'll tell you what, I mean, this offensive line for the last 2 years has been unbelievably good, and Spencer Brown was the only one who was even in my top 10, and I had him at 10 too, so maybe I am taking them a little bit for granted. But anyway, he's 6 on your list. Who you got at 7?
7 for me was Khalil Shakir. I originally had him a little bit lower, but like the more you think about the offense and how bad it was when he was out, like he really is the straw that stirs the drink. And I'm never going to expect him to be like I don't know. I don't think we expect him to be like Cooper Cup in his prime, like 1,500 something yards and like 10 touchdowns and all this other stuff. But I think he does like make that passing offense go in a way that the other players hadn't been able to do to this point. And so that's why he's the only receiver I had on my list. And we already talked about Keon Coleman being off of it and Dalton Kincaid being off of it, James Cook off of it. So like he's the only skill position offensive player on my list because he's the one that stirs the offense's drink.
Well, I can't agree with you more. Just like how I talked about the Bills' offense was perfectly fine when Spencer Brown was out against the Chiefs. The Bills' offense was anything but fine in Houston when Khalil Shakir did not play. That was a disaster, that offense in that game. That one game showed me right there how important he
Mhm.
was and his skill set. He is the one receiver on this group right now. We'll see about Josh Palmer, what he becomes, but he feels like the offense is going to dip if he's not in there for sure.
Right.
That reflected in my rankings. I had him number 4,
Yeah.
which was tied with Greg Thompson for the highest. We both had him at 4. Anthony Brask had him at 5, and Joe Miller had him at 5 as well. Joe Marino had him at 5 as well. So, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of stock into Khalil Shakir. I do think he's very important. Plus, he's going to be here for a long term because he literally just signed an extension. All right, keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, he had 800 yards last year and missed, 2 games. So, well, I mean, the season finale notwithstanding, he missed
Sure,
one
sure,
game,
sure.
and we saw what that was. So, like,
Right.
I mean, he could get to 1,000 yards and like 5, 6 touchdowns, but I just don't like. I don't know. I he was 4th on the consensus rankings, and I just wouldn't push him that high just based on what those numbers are going to end up being. Where he tops out.
Yeah,
Um,
completely fair.
yeah, eighth was I had Taron Johnson 8th. He's the other one I looked at on my list and like actually looked at how old he was just to make sure.
Sure.
He's 28. So again, I still think he's got like 3 more seasons there, but his replacement could be on the roster. They could have just drafted that guy in, in the
John Hancock
2025
or
NFL.
Jordan
Right,
Hancock. Yeah.
right. Got Herbie Hancock. Yeah, they could have drafted his replacement in April. So like maybe he's not on the roster 3 years from now. Um, but I do think like we haven't seen a fall off from him. We did see him like get dinged up a little bit more this year than he has over the last several seasons. But if you remember, like that was the big question mark with him early in his career was that he was dealing with a lot of injuries. And so if that returns, I do think like his critical nature would go down. So like if I took just say 2025, I would have him higher, I think. But looking at the future, maybe he's going to start getting phased out. Maybe we're not going to see him play 100% or 90 something percent of the snaps anymore. Going forward as they start to rotate in maybe some other players, maybe go three linebacker sets more. Like so, I had him a little bit lower than I would if it was just for the 2025 season.
Well, I had him a lot higher than pretty much everybody did. He was not in the consensus top 10. Maybe again, maybe I put a little more stock into the present and maybe I kind of got away from the future a little bit by having him as high as number 5. I'm looking at the panel here. Sterling had him at 7, Bruce Nolan had him at 7. Jeremy White had him at 5 too. So actually, I was wrong. So me and
Okay.
Jeremy White had him at 5 as well. But the majority of people did not have him ranked, and that's why he did not end up in the top 10. I would say this: I would double down if this was a list of players critical to the 2025 only
Okay.
Buffalo Bills. I would double down on him being a top 5 guy for me because I just think in a passing league he's that important. Plus, he's out there being a third linebacker as we all know too. So,
Actually, he turns 29 this offseason. So, I mean, 3 years would be aggressive, I think, for him. And he's got 3 years left on his deal. Like Ed Oliver, they can get out of it after this season, pretty easily. He makes less than 9 million next year, though. So I think he's probably going to be on the roster then.
mhm.
And then in 2027, when he's going to be 31 years old, he's over $10 million. Like it just could be. I don't think he's an extension candidate beyond that. And so, like, that could definitely be like after next season could be that kind of
And
break
he
point.
just plays a very he plays with a reckless abandon, which
Yeah.
is often good, but it does lead to him getting banged up more than you want to see too. So yeah,
Mhm.
future could be in doubt. I'm kind of talking myself out of my picks as we're going along here in real time. Maybe I should have did this podcast with you first, and then I could have came up with my top 10 list after. But anyway,
Right.
you got 2 more left here. Who do you got at 9?
Yes. I had Cole Bishop 9, which seems like a stretch for me. Because like I just said, Maxwell Harrison, like we haven't even seen him play a snap before, and already he's like critical for the future of the Bills. But I mean, Cole Bishop has barely played more than that in the NFL, and like I'm putting him on this list. But I do think that expectations for him are high. They didn't address the safety position with like anything meaningful this offseason. Like he really needs to take that next step and become the leader of the safety position room. I'm hopeful that he'll be able to do that. That's why one of the reasons at least they brought back Micah Hyde last year in the room was to kind of help him with that transition. I think he's going to be very critical to the Bills going forward, even if we haven't seen a lot out of him to this point.
Okay, and that's very much in line with I also had him at number 9. The panel had him at did the panel have him ranked? I don't believe the panel had him ranked. No, the panel didn't have him ranked. But anyway, he was 9 was the highest. Jeremy White actually had him all the way up at number 5, so that would have been the highest. So Jeremy considers him a very important player, but I'd say generally speaking, everybody else kind of falls in line with you. I agree with what you said 100%. All right, who you got? Who's your last guy?
Terrell Bernard was the last one on my list, a little bit lower than the consensus rankings and
Mm,
a lot of other folks. I just like you just talked about Spencer Brown when he was out and how the offense performed. And I mean, with Terrell Bernard out, like I think the Bills were able to get by. I do probably think I should have put him higher based on the fact that the Bills didn't draft any meaningful linebackers this year. Um, and they still have like, an aging Matt Milano. They've got Bernard, who is expected to play, 100% of the snaps. And then, Dorian Williams, who like, can sub in. But like, that linebacker room's pretty thin right now if they do have, another major injury. And so Bernard probably is higher. Like you said, he signed a multi-year contract extension. He's not, he's the defensive captain. Like he's an important player going forward for sure. But I just don't like. He obviously makes turnover worthy plays from time to time in big moments. Like he's a very solid player. So maybe I'm just underrating him in this ranking, but I didn't see a place to move him any higher.
That's fair. Yeah, I had him at 6. He was the consensus 6. A couple people had him really high, man. Joe Miller and Jerry Ostrowski. So the Overreaction Sports podcast guys are really, really high on him because they had him 2. Bruce
Two,
Nolan, 2, right after Josh.
Bruce,
Bruce
two.
Bruce
Come
Nolan
on.
had him at 4.
Oh,
Very
okay.
important.
Well,
Well, I feel like again, we could debate these, and I don't think there's a right or wrong because I think the top couple are really locked. I feel like Groot. I feel like this is how I feel. I feel like Groot, obviously Josh, and Bernard. I mean Benford, the corner,
Bedford,
not
right?
Bernard. Those 3 are just you can interchange 2 and 3 and maybe up to 4, but to me that's just obvious. The other guys, Spencer Brown, Bernard, Teron Johnson, Bishop, a lot of these guys, I just feel like you can make so many good cases for
Mhm.
or against, and I really don't feel like there's a wrong answer. You kind of explain it. I could see the case where I had him at number 6. I could see the case where he's a top 5 or even 4 guy for sure because, again, he is the quarterback of your defense. He is the middle linebacker. He is a playmaker. We saw it in the Ravens playoff game.
Mhm.
What a
Mhm.
big play that stripped or that fumble that he caused. That was a critical play in the game. Maybe the Bills don't
Yep.
win without that. And then you also see when he's mediocre and pedestrian, like he was against the Chiefs, alongside almost everybody else on the defense, you see the results. He's a very important player to this football team, and they are thin there. So, and he signed an extension. So, like you said, it's kind of it could go both ways. Let me recap your top 10 for everybody here. Josh Allen, Greg Rizzo, Deion Dawkins, Christian Benford, Ed Oliver, Spencer Brown, Khalil Shakir, Teron Johnson, Cole Bishop, and Terrell Bernard. And like you said, you had some really good explanations on guys why they didn't make your top 10. Let me ask you a question before we kind of wrap up. I got a couple other things. This came across my mind, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but as we're going through this list and we're talking about some contracts, and I kind of just want to get the feet wet a little bit here. This is, to me, something worth diving into much more over the course of a full episode, but it feels to me as you're talking about some of these players and contracts and when you could get out of them potentially. And the Bills salary cap situation, which if you don't know as things stand right now, it's not really great next year. Like the Bills are going to have to do some maneuvering and things like that. It's not one of those, we're free, go out and have a bonanza of new additions. Not going to happen. I look at this roster and it kind of feels like I feel like we say this every year too, though. No, this is the year. Like this is another. I don't want to say it's their last, but this is another amazing opportunity to win a championship right now, with possibly on paper as good of a team as they're going to see for the next couple of years, unless of course these young rookies and cheaper guys really hit. Then this team could continue, and that's going to be critical. I say that because guys like Ed Oliver, Matt Milano is going to be a free agent. Ed Oliver, guys who are on this list, some that we talked about here. Deion Dawkins, who knows if he just slows down a little bit, maybe they move on from him. If not next year, soon after. Or, you know what I mean? There's guys on this roster, Taylor Rapp, that Teron Johnson possibly. There's guys on this roster that might not be here in a year that are under contract right now. Matt Milano's not, but most of those other
Mhm.
guys, they might have to kind of like 2 years ago now or 2023 after the offseason when they got rid of a lot of big name guys and they were fine. I'm not saying they won't be fine, but you get a sense that like this roster right now on paper looks really good, but they might not be able to have this caliber of roster on paper next year. It makes sense.
It does make sense what you're saying. They reset last off season so that they could, lay the foundation again this year
Mhm.
and then into say 2026. I don't think they're going to be like really super hard up in 2026 where they're going to have to, gut the roster or anything like that. But you
Right.
could see like one or two of those names going away. Um, 2027 is another year where I think you're going to start seeing some of those guys age out. We already talked about Taron Johnson, Deion Dawkins,
Hmm.
some of those like older dudes. I mean, Tyler Bass is going to be 30 by then. Like, just like starting to have some of those age conversations, not just money conversations. Dawson Knox. I mean, not that I think he's going to be on the roster next year, but he's going to be 30. Like, so you are seeing that turnover from the branded bean draft guys now are going to be older to the point where they're going to have to move on from them, and we haven't obviously seen that because Bean hasn't been around for like the career span of an NFL, well, of a good NFL player yet, and so yeah, it's kind of that time for roster turnover based on age and expense. Whereas last year it was like free agent signings that we had to get rid of eventually because they had aged out because they were on their second contracts already. So yeah, we're going to start having to move past that initial core of Brandon Bean drafted players. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
Well, and like I said, we'll definitely dive a little deeper
Yeah.
into it and do some research and look at contracts and like when
Mhm.
they can start to get out of stuff and things like that. Dude, I was looking at so I'm looking at Buffalo Rumblings a couple days, I believe it was a couple days ago, and I'm looking at post
Mhm.
on there, and I seen an article from Matt Warren
Mhm.
predicting the Bills 14-3, man. 14-3, dude. What's up, man? 14 and
It's
3.
it is very optimistic of me, and I don't like to be like
And
crazy
what
optimistic.
talk about one of those losses too, by the way. Go ahead.
Right. So I had them actually bookmarking the season with, or book ending the season with losses. They lose in the opener against the Ravens, and then they lose
Mhm.
in the regular season finale to the Jets because they've only had two losses the entire year. So they're 14-2 heading into the regular season finale. I think that's a little bit optimistic, but when you go game by game, I think it's like super realistic that they do go on that run. I think the Ravens are absolutely going to demolish them in week one. I'm just going to throw that out there. The comments section was kind of all gloom and doom about that Ravens game, but you've got a healthy Ravens team with a very, very fresh Derrick Henry. Like, I just think that the Bills haven't shown the ability to
And they'll
to,
be
to stop.
motivated. They'll be
Right,
motivated just like the Bills are in the regular season. Like when they would lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs, they come that regular season game just means it feels like it means more to the Bills than it does to Chiefs. Let's
right.
just keep that
And
real.
and Roquan Smith is already talking about how it's going to be nice to go up and get like that revenge game and all that stuff. I'm like,
Mm.
hey, have week one, buddy. Like, so I do have them opening with a loss, but then like, you get into like the Miami Dolphins game is on a short week, but it's at home for Buffalo. They've shown that they can, beat the Dolphins. Obviously, like they have the Patriots in week 5, and then the Falcons in week 6 on Monday Night Football. I mean, if the Bills aren't 5-1 heading into their bye week, like I think that's probably a harbinger for like a bad season because they really need to win 5 of those first 6 games because they have a hard stretch coming up. They're playing the Panthers. They can't like base plan for the Panthers before they have the Chiefs game. Um, the Chiefs are on a rest deficit, and they're traveling for the game because they're playing the Commanders on Monday Night Football. So like the Bills
Mhm.
get an extra day to get ready for Kansas City. I don't know. I just think the Bills are going to step up and win that game at home. Um, Even though everyone's like, well, they should lose that game so that they can win the playoff game. Whatever, that's not a thing.
Nonsense. That's
Um,
ridiculous.
I do have the Bills losing in Miami, however, because for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, I think Tua is going to stay healthy through that game. Um, the Dolphins are kind of get that little brother syndrome. Like it's going to mean a lot more to the Dolphins than it is to the Bills at that point, especially with the Bills coming off a win over the Chiefs in my predictions. Um, that Miami's coming off their bye week, so they have a mini bye because they played the Ravens the previous Thursday, so they get an extra 3 days to prepare for Buffalo. I just think it's
Mhm.
kind of this recipe for an upset in the AFC East. I don't know if you do or not.
Well, I certainly hope they don't lose in Miami because I fully intend on going to that game.
Right,
I'm going to make a kind of a 4 or 5 day vacation out of it. I'm going to go see some friends from when I lived in Florida, go across the state and go see the Dolphins game. Look, I don't think it's outlandish whatsoever. It's whenever you see 14-3, it's like, damn. But it's
yeah,
not outlandish. Look, the Bills are literally right now in Vegas, the only team in the NFL that
yeah,
are favored in every single game. So it's definitely it's really not outlandish at all if you think about it that way. I was looking at the Athletic. I love the Athletic.
Sure.
I like to read them, and they have a model. It's not like Vegas, not betting, but they have like this model that they use, and the Bills are 83.5% to make the playoffs, and they're 10.1% to win the Super Bowl, which are both second in the entire NFL. However, they're not first in the AFC because the Ravens are actually favored to win in their model the Super Bowl. You're shaking your head. No, you don't like that.
I mean, it would be nice if the Ravens could win an important game in the playoffs once before we put them
Yeah,
winning the Super Bowl. I mean,
sure.
they every time they play a hard team in the playoffs, they fold like a cheap suit, man. Like, and so I'm not a hot take guy, but they have to prove that they can do it, and they haven't done that yet. They haven't beaten the Bills in any of those games. They haven't beat the Chiefs. Like, they just haven't been able to get past the tough teams in the playoffs. Like, and I remember people ragging on the Bills, a few years ago. Oh, you're able to beat the Colts with Philip Rivers. Oh, you're able to beat, whoever, the Broncos. Like, you can beat like some of the lesser playoff teams, but can you compete in the upper division of the AFC? And they haven't been able to do that. And so I definitely disagree with the Super Bowl one. And then the Bills being an 83.5% chance to make the playoffs, I think is about right. But the Ravens have a harder schedule than the Bills, in my opinion. And the Ravens play in a much harder division. So, like, the path to the playoffs includes like winning your division. That's one of the ways to get to the playoffs. And so I think the Bills are going to have a much easier time winning their division than the Ravens. And so I think it's kind of surprising that the Bills are behind Baltimore in that particular sense.
By the way, as we're wrapping up this recording today, I was hoping that we'd get a vote from the NFL about the playoff seeding because I think that's going to pass. I hate saying stuff where it's either it might already have been officially voted yay or nay by the time people listen to this, but that would be really interesting. And I'll say this too, making predictions, and you'll be the first to agree with this. We're in the middle of May. It's that time of year, folks. What else are we
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about? You know what I mean? It gets to a point, the schedule's fresh, it's new. This is kind of like the time of year where you make some predictions and then we shut up about that until training camp and preseason. And then you get to the regular season and then it becomes like legit prediction, putting your reputation, I guess, kind of on the line. Yeah, I don't think 14-3 is outlandish. I'll say this though. I've been, which by the way, everyone's jumping on their bandwagon now. I've been on this now for a couple months, and you've been on the show, you know it. I've been very high on the New England Patriots since
Mm-hmm.
early in free agency. I thought when they kind of overhauled their defense and got a new head coach, I'm like, this team's going to be better. And I think they improved offensively now, especially with the draft and adding Stephon Diggs to the mix as well. I think they're the second best team in the division. We know that. Point being, that New England game's going to be tough, especially on the road. And I also my new prediction, hot take, whatever you want to call it, I think Atlanta's going to be really good this year. Like, I think that Bills Falcons game, what is it, week 6, week 7 on Monday Night
Yep.
Football?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a marquee matchup. Like Atlanta's going to be, they're going to be good. It's not going to be the Bills aren't going to Atlanta to play the 2-4 Falcons in week 7 or whatever the hell week it is. That's what I'm predicting. I think they're going to be a good football team, man. Good young quarterback. They got a great running back. They got really good receivers. They drafted 2 defensive edge guys, Bates. They got some talent on that defense, and I think Atlanta's going to be for real this year. That's kind of one of the, that's a train I'm gonna ride that all the way through September. I can tell you that right now.
When I picked that game, I said that I think it's going to be one of those high scoring ones that the Bills are
Mm,
going to have to outscore the opponent as opposed to like stifling them with their defense. And obviously, you have to outscore your opponent to win the game. But I mean, like the offense is going to have to put up a bunch of points in that second half to keep the Falcons at bay because they could very easily be this year's Commanders and take that next step with
sure.
that talented young quarterback.
And a really shitty division too. So I mean,
Yes.
they're definitely in that mix. Last question here, real quick. Um, Derrick Henry got a new 2-year deal with the Ravens. I got to ask because everything's about James Cook and the running
Mhm.
back with the Bills. Do you think does his new contract have any effect whatsoever? You think on what the Bills may think of James Cook?
I think it is an effect on James Cook and what he thinks he's worth, but I don't think it's going to change what the Bills think. No, there's going to be a time when this is going to even out, and you see that the Bills or any NFL team are going to give a running back $15 million because the $15 million wide receiver is too expensive. But if you're looking at $15 million receivers right now, it's Cooper Cup, it's Cortland Sutton.
Yeah.
Cup played 637 snaps last year during an injury plagued year. Like, I mean, it was not a very good year for him as far as like being healthy. Sutton played has always been above 800 or 780 snaps, and Cook has topped out at 634 and played less than 500 snaps last year. So I don't think he's the litmus test for the $15 million wide receiver compared to the $15 million running back scenario. He just doesn't play enough, and whether that's because the Bills don't put him in there or they don't trust him or whatever it happens to be, the fact is like the Bills are showing you that they don't value him at $15 million a year by keeping him on the sideline as much as they do in the 2 minute offense and the third downs.
I agree. All right. So on my show with Joe from Queens, we do this segment called True or False. And some of it's sports, some of it's pop culture. It's just simple true or false. I asked Joe this, and I'm going to ask you this to end the show involving James Cook.
Okay.
True or false? James Cook will be on the field for day one of training camp. And I'm talking, when I say camp, I mean St. John's Fisher in July. James Cook will be on the field for day one of camp, or at the very least, he's on the field by day 3. So basically what I'm saying is James Cook, hold it out. True or false? James Cook will be on the field at the beginning of training camp for the Buffalo Bills.
He will not practice. So that's it's false. He won't be on the field. He'll be on the side on a bicycle saying that his hamstring is tender or something like that. James Cook is going to do the hold in my opinion. He's going to be like there, but not participating.
Okay. That's going to be one of the things, and I hope you're wrong. You hope you're wrong. I'm sure, but I could definitely see that being the case. That's certainly going to be one of the bigger things to monitor this upcoming summer in July in Rochester. Plus, I think there's a couple of really good roster battles between the defensive line and especially in the secondary. Some guys like Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram, Trey White, Dane Jackson. Some of these guys are going to be in for the fight of their lives to make this roster, with the Bills taking 3 guys in the secondary in the draft. So anyway, lots of interesting storylines. James Cook will certainly be one of them. All right. Make sure you follow Matt on X, also Blue Sky at Matt Rich Warren. Check out SB Nation. Appreciate you, buddy. New platform, and this, once we started recording anyway, not a disaster. I'll give you a hot take. You said I'm a hot take machine, or I call myself a hot take machine.
I didn't say that.
I'm going to plug this. They don't even pay me. They're not even giving me this platform for free, but everybody in the content creating world uses StreamYard, right? I predict by the summer, people are going to jump on my train, this EV Mux software that I'm testing and learning, because I still got a lot to learn, but it's going to be the way to go, man. Anyway, appreciate you as always, buddy.
Have a good one.
All right, man. I will be back. A brand new show coming up. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Thursday. Brand new show coming up on Thursday. Talk to you guys then.